we going to do in this video, Brain? The same thing we do in every video, Becky. Try and take over the world. With science!
My name's Rebecca and I'm a neuroscientist here to talk to you today about all things neuro and science. And in this video I'd like to address the topic of pain! Pain is a fun one. Theoretically, not practically, because when most people think of pain, they imagine a very physical response. Something happens that damages your body in some way, like you stubbing your toe on that doorway for the 500th time, and your body responds by making you say, ouchie! Whilst pain certainly can have a physical component, it also doesn't take long to imagine cases in which pain isn't purely physical. Emotional pain, like feeling sad or guilty, certainly doesn't come from physical damage to the body, and even physical damage to the body is often accompanied by an emotional response. In 2020, the International Association for the Study of Pain defined pain as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with or resembling that associated with actual or potential tissue damage. So there often is a physical component to pain, and this is backed up by our biology, as we have specific cells called nociceptors whose job it is to detect injuries, potential tissue damage, be that internal or external. But in amongst the other observations made by this association, they specifically note that pain and nociception are different phenomena. Pain cannot be inferred solely from activity in sensory neurons. So in this video, I want to have a look at the fascinating relationship between the biological reality of nociception and the experience of pain. When are they aligned? When are they not? And can we perhaps use one to leverage against the other? Let's kick off with perhaps the slightly easier side of that spectrum. What causes physical pain? And this we've touched on. Nociceptors are the specific cells designed to assess when our body has been damaged. They're a special category of somatosensors which more broadly deal with feelings of touch. And the fact that touch and pain share some processing pathways in the brain may lend credence to the most ancient of wisdoms that has been yelled across playgrounds since the dawn of time: just rub it better! Nociceptors respond to three types of stimuli: temperature, mechanical, and chemical. Temperature kind of speaks for itself, but with mechanical we're dealing with cuts and scrapes, whereas chemical is dealing with inflammation, so something usually caused by infections and colds. Achoo! Signals are sent from nociceptors to regions across the brain for processing, including the somatosensory cortex, which processes touch, but also affective areas that process emotions, like the insula. Physical pain is incredibly important at keeping us safe and helping us avoid damage. To prove that, we need only turn to the people who don't feel pain at all. Yes, they exist. Congenital analgesia, or a congenital insensitivity to pain, is a rare genetic disorder in which someone's nociceptors don't form properly, meaning they quite literally cannot feel pain. And although this might seem like a superpower up front, a BBC interview quickly highlights how this can be much more of a curse than a blessing. Nowadays, I'm not particularly a reckless person. I believe I'm actually more vigilant than most people because I know that if I were to injure myself, I wouldn't know how severe it would be. Internal injuries are the ones I fear the most. Appendicitis is what really scares me. Usually whenever I have any type of stomach issues or a fever, I go to the hospital just to get checked out. Pain is adaptive. It's our body's way of telling us something is wrong. Usually. Sometimes pain is just being a bitch. Increased back and joint pain as we get older, period cramps, headaches, and perhaps the best example, phantom limb pain. Phantom limb pain occurs after a limb has been amputated and involves feeling pain in that limb despite the fact it isn't there anymore. Though we now think there is some biological reason for this, for a long time it was considered purely psychological, and so a lot of the treatments were too, with a classic being mirror therapy. Mirror therapy is an effective approach which, as the name suggests, involves reflecting the remaining limb to give the illusion that the limb that is missing is moving, and this can be used to reduce pain. A purely psychological treatment to pain. Using your brain to get rid of the pain! Or at least that would be the tagline, if they needed an advert for very specific therapies. Interestingly, while we're on the brain, did you know that your brain itself doesn't actually feel pain? There are no nociceptors in the brain, which means those headaches we were just talking about aren't actually your brain hurting. Neither are brain freezes. We think these instead come from the blood vessels around the head. Why is it that brains don't feel pain? Because body weird. Science! Yeah, no, we really don't know, to be honest. But we have been able to use this to our advantage to do things like open brain surgeries. Once we're past the skull, it doesn't hurt to do, and by keeping people awake during the surgery, we can make sure that we don't hit or remove any important parts of the brain. There's a famous case study of this happening with a violinist, where she continued to play throughout the surgery to make sure the surgeons didn't accidentally damage her ability to play. But anyway, going back to that using brain to get rid of the pain headline, mirror therapy isn't the only effective way that we can use psychology to reduce pain, and you've probably used some of these in your everyday life. For example, the placebo effect, aka, this magic plaster will definitely make everything feel all better. Or, have you ever used a naughty curse word when you stubbed your toe on a door? Yep, well, psychologically, that also reduces the amount of pain you feel. Some studies suggest that the brain is actually much more sensitive to the unpleasantness of pain rather than just the physical intensity of the pain itself. This means that the physical intensity of pain doesn't necessarily equal the more emotional unpleasantness experience. Emotions have a huge role in how we process pain, and this also means that the emotional state that we're in can either dampen or heighten our perception of pain. Isn't that cool? I think that's cool. And we can go a step further, because our emotional response to pain also often serves a social function, right? Crying activates helping behaviour from people around us to make sure we get the help that we need when we're in pain or distressed. Another point for Inside Out on that one. But if pain is social, well, that opens up a whole other can of worms, because now we can look into the history and cultural relevance of pain as well. Pain historically, evolutionarily, has been something we've tried to avoid, but it's also a rite of passage in some cultures. For example, even today in the Brazilian Satere Maui tribe, it's tradition for young boys to put their hand in a basket full of bullet ants, which bite a lot and very painfully in order to prove their masculinity. So pain is a sign of being masculine, but it's also been associated with religion, like vengeance from the gods or to atone for our sins. In ancient Egypt, doctors would make patients sneeze or vomit to try and get rid of pain, as they believe it was caused by demons entering the body. I mean, that's just... I need to calm down. Okay, so we've covered the spectrum of pain from being almost purely physical to a combination of physical and emotional, and now even incorporating a social element. Of course, there is another fantastic example of the integration between physical, social, and emotional pain, and that's empathy. But that really does deserve a video all of its own. So, what exactly is pain? Well, much like colour, pain is a perception. Though it has a basis in biological reality, there are so many more factors than nociception which influence our perception of pain. And that's why even in hospitals, one of the primary ways to assess pain is still just to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10. Because from our own tolerances, which can vary based on age and physical activity, to our emotional and social surroundings, the only thing that is certain is that pain is individual. And so if we turn back to our definitions from the International Association for the Study of Pain, what we see is that pain is always a personal experience. That's all the time we have for today, but if you have any questions about the neuroscience discussed in this video or suggestions for future videos, please do leave a comment down below. Other than that, it's time for me to head back to the lab and plan what I'm going to do for the next video. But until then, please do let me know of any progress you make in trying to take over the world with science!